Hello, I'm Arthur Joura, Bonsai Curator at the North Carolina Arboretum. And today we're going to be working on a red maple. This red maple grew in the ground for about 5 or 6 years. Started from a little 1-year seedling. Was dug up and put in this big box. And it's been worked on since then. But this is the way it goes when they're in the big training boxes like this. They usually get attention once, maybe twice a year. So in the springtime or late winter, about as it is now, you can see the plant is dormant. We'll go ahead and prune it up, right? And then it goes back out in the growing area, and it truthfully doesn't get a whole lot of attention because we've got other plants to pay attention to, and they are more finished and presentable bonsai, so we have to stay on top of them. This one is allowed to grow. And so you might see it sometimes and the foliage will be up like this. Come around maybe once a year and push it way back. Okay, and in doing so, that's how we build these branches. Grow, cut, grow, cut, grow, cut, over and over and over through the years. And now, what you see before you is recognizable as a bonsai, perhaps. The pot is not, right? But that's where we're going next with this tree. It's a bonsai in training right now, and it will be still after the work is done today. However, it'll be much more recognizable as a presentable bonsai. Not presentable yet, but we're making a pretty big step today. We'll get out of this box and into an oversized bonsai pot, the next step along the way. And we'll do some refinement work on this tree and the branching that you see, because it's pretty rough right now. You know, we haven't been paying fine attention to it because it's not at that stage of development yet. We're getting it there, one step at a time. So one of the things that we're looking at, one is to figure out exactly which of these branches need to remain and which should come off, but also dealing with some things that are pretty unsightly, where branches were removed in previous years. And I wasn't too worried about the appearance because it's not being shown. Now we're going to have to pay some attention to things like this to make them look better. I'll also be putting some wire on this tree. The wire allows us to kind of fine-tune the arrangement of the branches. Previously, if you notice this right here, previously what I would do mostly would be use guy wires, right? So if I wanted to move this branch down, I would pull it down and then secure it with this wire and then let it remain like that for a long enough period. And then when you let it go, it would stay where you placed it. Well, we're going to be doing the wiring, the traditional wiring, where we wrap the wire around and that secures the branch in place wherever we bend it. The hazard with that is that if you leave the wire on too long, like you see right here, it'll dig in and leave a mark. And on this particular tree, it's got smooth bark, and so those kind of scars are pretty visible, and we don't want them, right? Because it makes it look like it's been worked on, and we don't want that. Well, it's easier for the wire to dig in when the plant is being grown as fully as this one has been. Now that we're going to be slowing down the growth rate, that should be less likely to happen, and it'll be incumbent on me to keep an eye on it to not let that happen. That's pretty much what we're looking at today. We're going to refine the branching. We're going to clean up some of the unsightly things that need to be addressed. And we're going to make the big move out of this box into a bonsai container. That's a fair amount of work, but it's enjoyable, and I'm excited to see how the tree's going to turn out. One of the things that we're doing at this stage, I'm moving from branch to branch to branch. There's lots of new growth, okay? Everything you see that has this tannish or reddish color to it is new material, possibly just a year's worth of growth. So places where big cuts were made, like right here and here, that's a sizable cut, not a real big cut, but it's a sizable cut. And when you stop the expression of growth the way that it was going, the response on the tree's part is to push new buds. You don't know exactly where those are going to occur, although on a red maple, you have a pretty good assurance that they're going to push out all over the place. That's one of the things that makes this a good species to work with, and most maples good to work with. But it's going to push out, the plant is going to push out more than you actually need. And so you go along and look at the possibilities that you're being offered. So right here, I'm looking at this and all this growth, and I start kind of a process of elimination. And so I think this is very expendable. I get rid of it. I look at this, and I don't think I want this one going up like that. And let's, for neatening's sake, take off that little stub there. And same way here. This is a little stub remaining from the last pruning. And so we'll clean it up like that. I have a choice to make here, whether to go with this piece, right? So here's a heavy piece transitioning down to a little bit lesser piece and then a smaller piece than that, or I can go with this. And in this instance, I'm going to go with the lesser one because it's higher up and I don't want the growth to be too heavy and clunky higher up in the tree. Those are the kind of decisions I'm looking at. And we get there frequently by a process of elimination. There's also the need to visualize. You have to look at things as they are, but imagine how they might play out otherwise. And so when you have an option between this branch and this branch, you have to visualize which one of these will best serve your purposes. And in this case, again, I'm going with the lighter branch, the lighter weight branch, because this one right here is more flexible. And so I can move it where I want it to go. Also, it has that lighter feeling that I want up here. If I'm working on a lower piece, I might opt for the heavier section because down here, the plant is growing less vigorously than it is up here. And so I might want to hold on to the heavier things because this part of the tree will take longer to replace something of that size than the upper part of the tree will. Okay, we're about an hour in on this project, and what I've accomplished so far was to go through the entirety of the branch structure and thin it out and organize it. And in most cases, all I want at any juncture are two divergent paths. So at any intersection, if there were more than 2 lines coming out of it, I would reduce them to just 2, and in some cases, just 1. And this is to open things up, to keep it from getting so congested. There's just a little bit of wire on this, okay? Because I mentioned before how easy it is to scar these if the wire gets left on too long. But, you know, I like the look of a plant that's been grown with that cut and grow technique. That gives you things like this, very angular. And it looks more authentic to me as the way a tree branch might be structured. When we do wire, sometimes it can come out with a kind of artificial look. So the wiring that I've done here is mostly to take something that's just straight, like this was straight, and to give it a bend, to give it some movement. Movement is good. Straight is less interesting. Movement creates interest. And so we also think in terms of unequal movement. So you look at a branch like this one right here, right? And we have a long stretch, a short stretch, a long stretch. This creates not only movement, but interest. And we're creating taper as well, right? So this is heavier than this, and this is heavier than this, and this is heavier than that, and so on down the line. And that too creates a more authentic, believable looking branch. That's our purpose. You'll notice perhaps up top that I've used some pretty heavy wire on some smaller branches. And what that does is allow me to put the wire on less snugly, to let it be a little more loose. Because these parts up here, these young parts in the upper region of the crown, the canopy, they have the most growing vigor. And that means they're going to get to the point where that wire is constricting sooner. So being able to put it on a little more loosely gives me a little more leeway. It means having to use a heavier wire, which is more noticeable, but I don't care because this isn't a show tree. This is a tree that's in development, in training. And so I'm getting things right, and I live with the wire for now and try to avoid doing damage, which would be more lasting than the wire itself. The next step along the way is to now address those places that I said are unsightly and to try to do something with them. And in most cases, what that's going to involve is carving. We'll carve out the dead wood, create a little cavity, and that's a better thing to look at than the decaying stub of an old pruning cut. There's one thing I did here that involved taking off an entire branch, a pretty well-developed branch, but I felt like it wasn't in a good place. And now I've got this big stub here. And I don't necessarily want to, prune this flush and then carve it out. I think what we'll do instead is make a little piece of dead wood. Because even healthy trees, if they're old, they generally have some dead wood on them. It doesn't matter if they're deciduous or evergreen trees, they'll typically have, older ones will have some dead wood remaining. This dead wood won't last like it would on a juniper, but it's okay. For the duration of its existence, it'll be an effect. It'll be something to look at. Hopefully not a distraction. We'll see how it works out. So I'll be carving this and excavating some of these other areas. All right. Okay, so the carving part of the operation is done. You can see what we did with the stub out front, peeled off the bark, kind of tore it up a little bit. And the idea is not to make it look like it's been carved, to make it look like it happened like that out in nature. With these cavities, you know, excavating them a little bit, but paying attention to the fact that we don't want water, rainwater, to collect down in there and accelerate rot. So each one of these has a little passageway for water to escape, right? And that'll help keep the wood from rotting straight on through. The tree sets up its own protective zones to inhibit the encroachment of fungus, but keeping it from holding water is a useful thing. Now, the next stage of the operation is the repotting, which will mean getting it out of this box, picking apart the root ball, trimming, and getting it into this pot. This is a big pot, bigger than what the tree will ultimately go in. It's also not a clay pot, it's a, you know, kind of plastic composite pot. But that's fine for this next stage. Stepping it down, not trying to do too much at once, we'll get it into a bonsai pot eventually. Okay, so it's done. It took about 3 hours to do the work today. Bear in mind that this started as a seedling back in the mid-90s, right? So it took that long to get to today. And then 3 hours today. And now this year, as it grows, I'll need to be paying more attention. I can't let it just kind of take care of itself like we've been doing for the last few years, just let it grow. Now, if we want to preserve the shape that we've given it, we have to be more closely monitoring it and pruning it as the season goes through. And of course, I'll need to keep a sharp eye on these wires so that they don't bite in. The dead wood, I'm happy with it. I think it did well. And when I watered, I was watching to make sure that these cavities drained out effectively, and they did. You'll notice we wired the plant into the pot, and that's just a precautionary thing. This plant being so big and heavy, there's not a whole lot of chance that it's going to get disturbed and fall out of the pot, but it could, and we wouldn't want that to happen. So it gets fastened to the pot, and then these little bits of garden hose are put there as protective pads to keep the wire from biting in, because we have to torque it down pretty hard to make it secure. All in all, I feel really good about how the work went today and how this piece is progressing. It's just one of many that we have, you know. This is how our collection has largely come into being. Even trees that were donated to us, they undergo a lot of change once they get here, you know. They get reworked so that they belong in our collection. But these trees that were started from a very young age, they're being developed every step of the way to be the kind of trees that we like to have in our collection, especially a native plant like the red maple, but just to give it that authentic feel of an old tree in nature. So I hope it looks good to you. You know, that's something I find out later. I do it to please my own eye, and then we put it in front of the public and we see what kind of reaction we get. It'll be a couple of years still before this one goes on display in the bonsai garden, but it's getting there, and it's a very pleasing thing to see it progress so nicely. Thanks for watching today.
How did the art of bonsai come to be so central to the identity of an arboretum in southern Appalachia? At the North Carolina Arboretum, we consciously root a foreign art in our own place, updating its ancient image to the present day. Subscribe to the Curator's Journal, a year-long online course offering the ultimate insider's view of bonsai at the North Carolina Arboretum by curator Joura.